Hey everybody, it's Jason Lowe. You can call me J Lowe, back with another episode of AI Diatribe. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by the illustrious Puneet Arora, who happens to be the president of a little company called Yellow.ai. This is an enterprise grade conversational AI platform, helps businesses automate and personalize customer employee interactions using all sorts of media channels, voice, chat, email. They also offer AI powered virtual assistants. They integrate with backend systems. They do all of this to scale, which is really quite nice. So, Puneet, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jason. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation as well.
All right. Well, let's dive a little bit into you, sir.
Okay.
So, I can't help but go and look at your LinkedIn and notice that you got a degree in computer engineering. So, it's really interesting because all of your experience kind of is sales and leadership oriented. So, how do you go from getting a degree in computer engineering to sales leadership, and what made you make the change?
Yeah, no, that's thanks for asking that. So I grew up in Southern Africa. I grew up in a country called Zambia. And as I was coming to the US, Dad gave me an option. He said, "What do you want to do? Do you want to become a doctor or do you want to become an engineer?" And at that point, I knew I did not want to be a doctor. So I said, "I know I don't want to do that. So I guess I'll be an engineer." So picked engineering. Now, what engineering to take? I did not honestly know the difference. Electrical engineering, computer engineering, computers were starting to come in. We started doing I did some Fortran programming in school at that time. And so I said, I'll be a computer engineer. And that's how I got into engineering and graduated with an engineering degree. But you're right, Jason, never really practiced engineering as a profession. Got into sales day one, started off with outside BDR type of activities, then went into selling, went straight into enterprise selling across different products, different product lines, and then different size of companies, different types of products, etc. But I will say at the end of the day, you know, the engineering background did help me. It helped me kind of think about everything as a process, be able to take complexities and break them down and look at each part of that complexity. I've never been, I have an engineering degree. I have never practiced engineering, but I like to think that I think like an engineer at times.
And it's actually a really, really good thing to have in sales these days, because that's the thing that there is not a dearth of. A lot of people that are actually skilled in talking and relating to people, and the sales skills that you need, plus a technical acumen. There's just not as many of those. This is why sales engineers are such a in demand role right now. And I have to ask, how did your dad feel about you immediately going into sales?
So I remember when I told him I'm going into sales, his first reaction was, "That's not a profession." And once again, comes from a very different background. He's done very well for himself, but it was not he's like, "That's not a profession." I do remember though, one of my first transactions was a very large size deal that we closed very early on in my career, and that netted me a very, very large size commission check. And when I showed him that check, that's when he finally said, "Okay, this might be something, I think you might have made the right decision."
Well, how did you eventually get to Yellow AI? I mean, what drew you to Yellow AI?
Yeah. Look, few things I would say. I think the first and primary thing, Jason, was the opportunity. AI is big. AI in CX transformation is, I think, one of the primary use cases today where AI is flourishing, right? If you look at CX, if you look at the software spend in CX, it's a couple $1 billion a year. But then if you look at the overall spend in CX, the software spend, but also the labor spend, you're talking in trillions and not in billions. And AI is going to change all of that. So for me, the first thing really was the opportunity. AI, CX just seem to come together. And then specifically on Yellow, as I started talking to Yellow, it's funny, the from first conversation to getting everything signed, sealed, and delivered was under 14 days. And that was because it just seemed like a perfect marriage from a skill set perspective, having an Indian connection, but you obviously been my entire career has been in the US, and Yellow.ai starting off in India and trying to come into the North American markets. That seemed like a very good connection. And then obviously my background in CX, right? I worked at LivePerson, which is on the chat side, and 8x8 on the voice side, and then all the CX with Salesforce and Oracle. It just seemed like a perfect marriage from that point of view. And then when I looked at Yellow specifically, a few things just kind of stuck out to me. First, being a leader in the space, 650 plus enterprise grade customers. That's not something you have to talk about specifically in something as new as AI. And then just where those customers were: India, Indonesia, Middle East, North America, having that experience across the globe, across different types of customers, different sizes of customers, different verticals, different segments, showed me that leadership in where Yellow.ai was. So it was that. It was the opportunity, and just honestly, it was an opportunity that just kind of really, really came together.
That's an interesting story. And I think you're right. There's a lot to be excited about as it relates to CX and AI. I mean, we're going to go through some pretty serious workforce changes over the next 3 to 5 years, I think, and AI is going to play a major role in customer facing positions. Does that worry you at all? Is there anything about this that worries you? I mean, there's the obvious excitement in what AI is going to do in CX, but is there anything that concerns you?
Absolutely. Look, you're right. The excitement is there, right? Everybody wants to do something with AI. They see the potential cost savings, they see the potential efficiencies, and bringing AI into CX is a very easy path to go through. But what worries me is, you're right, is there's a lot of worry there, is people not understanding how to evaluate or how to use AI correctly. People not understanding what the right path is, what the right, it's so new. So people are just unaware, I should say that, right? I kind of, I kind of liken this to the days of CRM when Salesforce had just come out. I was fortunate in my career to be at Salesforce when Salesforce was a much smaller company. And we were all trying to figure out, where does CRM fit in? Is it for pipeline development? Is it for forecasting? Is it just account management? Can you do more with it? The whole marketing automation piece, and CRM grew into what it is today. I think that's where companies are today with AI in the CX space, right? Try to figure out, where can this come in? What value can AI add? How do I quantify this? How do I go and get the funding for this? How do I go and get the investment to go and make these things happen? So these are kind of some of the struggles that I'm seeing with companies as they start looking at start using AI. And it's very, very real for us to kind of bridge that gap in where the expectations of what companies want to do and what AI can deliver is realized.
That's probably one of the biggest challenges, right? Is let's figure out how to actually calculate the ROI, which sometimes isn't quite so easy because it doesn't actually show up necessarily as sales dollars, or it doesn't necessarily show up as raw cost savings. It might be time savings, it might be efficiency savings, it might be a cut in payroll if you're able to really calculate it down to that. But you're right. That's one of the biggest challenges that people face, is how do I actually quantify the effect that this is having, and what is the positive effect it's having on the bottom line? Do you, in your unique position of being in the CX world, are there any other easily identifiable struggles that companies might face in the adoption of AI, besides calculating ROI and figuring out how it's going to fit and how it's going to work, as if that's not enough?
So calculating of the ROI is absolutely a struggle. But then how do you operationalize the investments, and how do you operationalize the deployment and use of AI within a company? That's a struggle that lots of companies face because it's so new. A vendor we were working with, one of the largest paint suppliers in North America, and their question was, how can you guarantee that AI will not tell my customers to go and drink paint? Because that can be dangerous. Now, how can you guarantee a human agent won't say that? So it's how do you operationalize some of these nuances that becomes difficult because we've never seen it. And then how do you get the teams aligned? Because many of the teams who are now who've been chartered to go and deploy this have never worked with AI before. And AI is a different type of product, different type of solution. So quantifying and justifying the ROI is absolutely one problem or one challenge we face. But then once that is done and we are in an active deployment cycle, it's aligning and operationalizing those solutions and operationalizing the workflows to make sure companies that have no experience in AI can go ahead and get these things done. It's not as easy as it was with enterprise software a few years ago. That's for sure. It's a new paradigm that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, it's so different. And in my experience talking with customers that use Yellow and use other types of products, you're absolutely right. AI is a really big thing, and it takes a lot of 30,000-foot view knowledge as to where it can be placed strategically and the different capabilities it has as it relates to internal processes and things that people might do. And some companies they just don't have the people that really know how to apply that knowledge towards their particular use cases or their particular processes. And so I'm speaking outside of the CX realm right now. I mean, in general, you're absolutely right. It's such a big new deal. It's such a big change that companies are overwhelmed. This is why AI consultation is becoming a thing. This is why I'm headed in the direction I'm headed, quite frankly. And this is where companies are going to need that additional strategic help. So it's good that you cite that because I completely agree with you.
And I think that this role is becoming very, very critical, right? At the end of the day, as a vendor, when we enter and work with the potential partner, we do not know them as well. But people like you who understand technology but understand the customer's needs can come in and bridge that gap and facilitate those conversations. So I think this role that you are in now, Jason, and firms like yours, which is why Yellow.ai is so channel friendly, because it's these channel partners, these channel consultancy partners who can come in and help bridge that gap because they know technology, but they also know the end customer better than we do. So it's a very, very important role. And when done correct from the start, and that doesn't mean start of implementation, start of the actual sales cycle, is how you start realizing that value, or how the customer starts realizing this value throughout the life cycle. So it's a very, very important role, and I'm glad that firms like yourself are really, really focusing on that.
Well, I'm glad too, and thank you for saying that. I think that it's definitely a growing and burgeoning area, and it's going to be a lot of fun for the next few years.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about how things are going at Yellow. So one of the things you and I both know, because we have our finger on the pulse and we're seeing the rapidity of press releases and changes and new models and capabilities and this scientific innovation here and this technological breakthrough there, there's a lot going on. Companies are facing some serious challenges in figuring out how to keep up with the pace of advancement in AI capabilities. So how are you guys doing? How is Yellow staying agile? How are you evolving as it relates to these new technological breakthroughs?
Yeah. So I will say, I've been now at Yellow for just over a year, and I have seen so much change and growth in the product in the last year. And if I were to compare this to 30 years of my career, I don't think I've seen that much change come out of an organization in a single year, as compared to what we're seeing. It's because AI is forcing us to change. It's forcing us to look at different ways. Is it one LLM? Is it multiple LLMs? Is it large language modules? Is it small language modules? How do you work between those two? Where does reporting fit into this? I'll give you a simple example. What we would call deflection, and how we calculate deflection, is not the same way every customer calculates deflection. And deflection is one metric in the CX world of success. So we've had to adopt our methodologies, we've had to adopt our product, we've had to adopt our teams to make sure that we are staying agile and evolving across this vastly growing but quickly growing AI field. And we're seeing it on a day in, day out basis.
So one of the big things right now, as we tape this, and so for those that are curious, we're taping this on May 29th of 2025. The big thing that is hitting this year is Agentic AI. And a lot of people are really excited about that. There are some people that are hesitant and maybe not sure if it could actually provide any significant value. There are some people that, as you mentioned before, they don't trust it quite enough because of hallucination with LLMs and because Agentic AI is primarily driven by understanding from LLMs of current situations and context and the like. There's some risk there. You're absolutely right. Just because an LLM says, go drink paint, that there's not a guarantee that a human being won't. But it's really interesting because there are some studies, and forgive me, I can't cite them right now, but they were gauging against hallucination by LLMs as far as a percentage of accuracy, and also against the memories of human beings. And the LLMs actually hallucinated less than human beings did on their historical memories, which is a really interesting paradigm to take into consideration. But I digress. Agentic AI is definitely the way things are headed. And you being in the CX space, Yellow specifically, and other companies like you, you're right there on the front lines where if you incorporate agentic capabilities within and around your platform, you've got a definite edge. You've got a definite lead. So how are you actively working on incorporating agentic AI capabilities into and integrated with the Yellow AI platform?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, agentic AI is front and center in what we do here at Yellow. And as AI has grown from, your NLP based models to Gen AI to now agentic AI, as I said, we've had to transform as well. So to give you a perspective, we do roughly about 16 plus billion conversations annually across our customers.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. The interesting part is about 2 billion of those are agentic in nature. What does agentic mean? Meaning you're taking an action. So you're not just providing an answer, but you're now taking the action that promotes that answer to be successful. And that could be integration with other systems or continuing workflow. If this, because of this, now this is being triggered, now that requires approvals that have to come from a different system, and our agents are doing that through AI. So we are front and center in how our customers are using agentic AI to go drive customer value. So we are seeing that across the CX world. We are seeing that across the EX world as well. Password resets, for example. Not just going and saying, yes, you need to do a password reset, but going and actually doing the password reset and sending the confirmation via messaging on the cell phone to authenticate, etc. So going and doing those actions, we're seeing 2 billion of those in our 16 billion plus conversations being truly agentic.
So that's interesting. Now, I have a follow-up question to that, if I may. And it's a little bit different angle, in my opinion, and this is just Jason speaking. You're talking about agentic AI, which under today's current definition means that some sort of a chatbot, whether that's LLM driven, whether that's conversational AI driven, whether that's something, can have a conversation and achieve some certain task based on some guidelines that has been given for certain types of tasks. But it's interesting to note that there are specific guidelines and there are specific swim lanes that these LLMs are able to work within that are controlled. In other words, the LLM is not having to necessarily make a decision. So there is the differentiation between agentic AI, which is doing things, but autonomous agents, agents that can look at current situations, see the entire landscape, see the forest, see the trees, and decide what the best action is to take rather than just being told if A happens, then do B. And if C happens, then do D.
And then actually take those actions, Jason.
Yeah.
So that's the next step. So once you determine what the action needs to be, and you're right, it is autonomous. After that, it is going and taking those actions, which is where, that's where you need the depth in the platform. That's where you need the deeper integrations. That's where you need the myriad of different pieces coming together, which is where our investments are. It's not just making the decision, but then taking the action on top of that decision. You're spot on.
Yeah. Well, and I have to imagine that your roadmap is full of items that are precursors to truly autonomous agentic AI becoming the thing.
It is. If you think about it, right? The whole notion initially was you've got a knowledge base and you pull information from that knowledge base and you provide that as an answer. From there, then move to, okay, let's go and leverage these multiple LLMs that have come out. Maybe somebody focuses on a single LLM, or they have multiple that they work with, but you leverage those to go and get the answer that you want. Where we are really seeing this market go is the orchestration between the different sources and making sure that the answer and the action that is going out is accurate. Let's think about it in a human world. A human agent doesn't just rely on one source of data or one piece of training that they've had. They have to go through multiple different sources to go and get the end customer the right answer. It's the same exact thing with AI. So one of the biggest advancements where we are working on today and continuing to grow it is on how do we orchestrate between these different sources. It could be one or various LLMs, right? We don't know who the leader is, or who will become the leader. They could be various, and some are better in certain areas and some are better in others. But then also maybe using, small language modules, right? Maybe something that's very specific. So for example, we created a model in Bahasa for Indonesian market. When do you want to go and get that or leverage that, because you will get better results versus something that is a little bit more generic or not focused for that market? When do you want to go and leverage your own knowledge sources versus using an LLM? So it's that orchestrator in between, which is what Yellow.ai becomes, in making sure the right information is going to the right agent to deliver the right result, which will then facilitate the right action, which is what Agentic AI is.
So, a related question. You're talking about a bunch of different models, and one other area where things are rapidly evolving is cloud-based LLMs or cloud-based generative AI, or let's just say AI, versus edge-based. There are a couple of reasons why people might use LLMs at the edge versus in the internal core. A is latency and speed, and also being able to use perhaps maybe a little bit smaller model and less consumption of resources. But B, also from a security perspective, because
Cost.
cost. So there's cost, but then there's also security, right? If we're doing something edge, we're doing something local that's not necessarily exposed to the entire infrastructure, the entire set of knowledge sources internally. Oftentimes this is taking the form of perhaps some sort of a traffic cop, where on the edge you have a query come in. This LLM can understand the intent of this query, realize that it needs to be farmed out to this model for an answer, or farmed out to that model for an answer, or needs to resource these particular data points. And so it needs to be addressed by this model. And then it can go ahead and direct that traffic to the appropriate models or the appropriate infrastructure. Are you working on any particular use cases or any features that might incorporate or use some sort of an edge LLM capability?
Absolutely. I mean, we see it on a daily basis with across our customer base. I'll give you a specific use case. So Yellow.ai focuses a lot on the CX market and on the employee service market. So these are employees of large companies coming in and leveraging AI to password reset or update a vacation schedule or taking a time off or things like that. So in many of those type of cases, you don't need to go out. You just want to look at information and knowledge sources which are close to you. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of information that you want to control. You don't need to go out because it's going to be a lot more expensive also. So we are seeing those use cases where we're limiting the knowledge that these AI agents can access. And companies have that ability to say, for these kind of use cases, I only want to access these knowledge sources. But if the question becomes a little bit broader, then let's go out and leverage different knowledge sources.
Interesting. Okay. Let me kind of shift the direction here a minute. I'm curious. It's always fascinating to me to see what AI-centric companies are actually drinking their own champagne, or how AI is affecting them internally. So this is actually quite pertinent as it relates to Yellow, because you are in CX and you are on the forefront of positive ROI for AI use. How's AI doing things within Yellow.ai internally? I mean, is it having an impact on teams, on processes, maybe even on culture? How is AI affecting Yellow?
Absolutely. We've had to change a lot of our processes, customer facing and sales processes as well, to align to this AI world. I'll give you a couple of examples, Jason. I look at, I'll make an analogy and talk about the good old days of selling enterprise software, right? You go in, you go deploy, you go in and companies making a big decision on a big enterprise vendor, ERP or CRM or supply chain. And that process is a long one, usually 6-12 months. And finally, the vendor is selected, everybody high fives each other. Then you go into deployment. And that deployment is never easy, right? Was never easy. Usually takes 6-7 months sometimes to deploy, and usually was difficult because you're talking about integrations, multiple different systems, change in expectations, etc. But once you finally go live, then everything is good to go. But you only make tweaks in the new year. For example, if it's CRM, okay, let's update quotas, let's update, maybe change the territory models or change some of the reporting structures or the approval processes, etc. Right? My point is, every 3-6 months is when you look at it and you make small changes. With AI, that model has completely changed. AI is a living instance. So what we saw is, when we took customers live, we were like, great, the customer is live. And then they would come back to us literally a couple of days later and say, oh, what about this use case? Or what about this response? How can this be tweaked? Well, we need more knowledge for that, or we need to leverage a different knowledge source. So what we realized was, in order for us to be effective and our customers to see value, the deployment had to be a continually ongoing model. So what we did was, rather than the traditional sales, and then from sales you get deployment and customer success comes in once you're deployed, we created pods. So in that pod is, delivery, is CSM, is product, is QA, inside certain pods. So they can iterate on an ongoing basis. So that AI instance is a living agent in essence. So we've had to fine-tune our organization to adapt to this need that we were seeing from customers, to make sure that this model continues to evolve and grow on a daily basis.
Interesting.
From a sales perspective, as we get into customers, they come and say, great, tell us where AI can help us the most. So we've had to create what we call our Agentic discovery process, where we use our product, we use AI, we ingest, 6-7 months of transcripts of call logs, of voice logs, of all their transcripts coming in. And from there, we will spit back based on, this is all AI driven, where we think the best use cases are, where they will see the highest return. And then and those become kind of where they start saying, okay, now how do we leverage AI within our organization? So we've had to adopt AI and change in processes across delivery, customer satisfaction, and sales in very big ways. We've had to transform our organization to make us more agile and make us more AI friendly.
Significant changes due to AI, even in a company that is AI. It's fascinating to see. So where do you use AI? I mean, you personally, where do you use AI? Do you use it on a daily basis? What are some of the things that you do?
Yeah, look, I'll be upfront here. I think I'm not the biggest user of AI today. Where I do use AI is, when we have Zoom meetings, take notes and then summarize those notes and actions that come out of that, which sometimes we might forget because nobody's really taking notes in meetings these days. But that's the extent to where I use it. I think it's something that I have to start doing more. But I am a new user to AI, if I can say that.
You can say that for sure. And there's a lot of people that are in the same boat as you. That, I mean, even in the middle of the tech sphere, it's really interesting to see people make discoveries. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I could do this using AI, or I could do that using AI. That's fascinating. It's fun to see a lot of light bulbs going on all the time for people discovering how to use AI. So this is going to create a lot of, dare I use this word, chaos. I think we're going to see a lot of chaos over the next few years as it relates to AI being adopted, but there's also going to be opportunity there. So what types of chaos, what types of opportunity do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, Jason. I think we will see a lot of lot of change, which will generate a lot of chaos over the next few years on how AI comes in and changes operations and people within organizations. But I really see it in two areas. First, I think companies will have to look at doing things in different ways, right? AI forced us to relook at how we service customers, how we sell to customers, and we had to adopt and do things in a different manner. I think all businesses will be forced to look at different parts of their processes and see how can they augment that with AI, either to try and find cost savings or become operationally more efficient. So that is happening today. But I think on the other end of things, I think it's going to change how individuals look at what their role is within a company and their skill sets are within companies. I think people will have to reskill because certain tasks AI is going to take away from humans. How do you reskill so that you are being more efficient and you are growing within an organization? In fact, I think within Yellow itself, I've had 2 or 3 conversations already where staff is coming and saying, hey, I can see my role or whatever my activities are not needed in the next 3 years. What can I do today that helps me upskill to become more relevant in the future? So I think it's those two things. It's businesses adopting and being forced to look at ways to do things differently with AI, and then people who are going to have to say, what do I need to do for myself to make me more relevant 5 years down the road?
Sage words, and I completely agree with you. All right, my last question for you. This has been a great conversation. I'm, again, very, very grateful that you chose to spend some time with me today. But I like to end a lot of my interviews asking your advice. What advice would you give from your perspective? What advice would you give to a company that is just trying to start wading into this crazy, scary, complex area called artificial intelligence? What types of things would you tell them to do that will make that exploration more meaningful, more impactful, and quite frankly, give a good positive ROI in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you 2 things. One, you've got to be open. You've got to look at approaches, look at avenues, look at procedures that you might never have thought could be changed. So you've got to be open. And secondly, don't go for the home run. You can't go and say, I'm going to implement AI and all of a sudden XYZ problems are going to be solved and we're going to deliver these returns. Start small and grow from there. And if that's the approach you take, you will be successful, the company will be successful, and the journey will be more manageable. So start small, be open, and grow from there. And I think AI will be an easier path for any company to take.
I don't know that I could have said that any better myself. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been quite the conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Jason. I had a lot of fun.
All right, everybody. That's another AI Diatribe episode. Once again, a big thanks to Puneet Arora for joining me today. You know what to do. If you like this, do all the things. Hit all the buttons, like, subscribe, whatever it is that you need to do to check this out. And we'll be back with another AI podcast episode really soon.